Okay, welcome everyone and Happy New Year, 2025. Here we go. Call the meeting to order. Do we have any declarations of conflicts today? Seeing none, can I have an approval of our agenda? We just have the one item. Okay, moved by Jackie, seconded by Bob. All those in favor? We don't have anyone online today, do we?
Nicholas Kuhn is doing the presentation.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, we don't have any members. Okay, thank you. Okay, adoption of the minutes from Tuesday, November 5th. Moved by Counselor Beck, seconded by Jackie. All those in favor? Thank you. Any business arising from those minutes? Okay, seeing none, we can move on to our reports. And today we are doing a draft of the official plan. And I'll turn it over to Donna Miller-Ayton, our Manager of Policy and Heritage, who can open up the discussion. We also have, is it Cool or Cole?
Cool.
Cool.
Nicholas Cool.
Yeah, from O2 Consultant.
Yeah.
He is online to do the presentation that you would have gotten earlier today to brief yourself prior to the meeting. So over to you, Donna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason, is Nick there? I see that we're having a
Teams
little bit of
is
technical
being-
difficulties, so
Challenge.
just giving Nick
We had him.
some time to join, and then I'll just start. Nick will finish. He was there. Sorry.
Yeah.
While we're waiting for the infrastructure to work better for us, we have a new planner too that started in the new year. That's Brad Fintz.
Hi.
Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yeah, Brad Vince, yeah, that's great.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, happy to be here.
Hailing from,
Originally from Ontario, but we relocated from Victoria, BC to be here in PEI, so.
okay. Were you in Victoria or were you in, what's the little place right beside Victoria?
There's a few of them, there's like Esquimalt or Oak Bay or, yeah, but I was right in Victoria.
Okay.
Yeah,
You were.
yeah, I was working for the city of Victoria there.
Okay. For Marianne?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Ready?
Nick, we're back, I think. Can you hear us now again?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So good evening, members of Planning Board. So the request before the board today is to proceed to public meeting to commence the City of Charlottetown's new draft official plan adoption process per Section 11 of the Planning Act. To support this request, Nicholas School, who's online, will be doing a review of the draft official plan. And then I will come back to recommend and lay out the legislative requirements that would fulfill this request. So Nick, free to go ahead when you can.
Thank you very much, Donna. Can people confirm they're able to see my screen share?
Yep.
Excellent, thank you. So once again, as Donna mentioned, my name is Nicholas Cool. I am with the company called O2 Planning and Design, based out of Calgary, Alberta. We operate nationwide though. We've done a lot of work actually in Atlantic Canada. We're active in Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and Labrador, and PEI right now doing stuff. And we've been engaged in this new official plan project for about 2 years now, working alongside Donna and the entire planning team at the city. As you mentioned, we're at the end of the project timeline right now. We have this full draft document, and we're before you today here to request that we initiate that formal adoption process that exists under the statutes of the province of Prince Edward Island. So in today's meeting agenda, I will be providing a brief overview of the project process itself, and then we'll spend the lion's share of the discussion actually talking about the draft official plan. So I'm going to work through it in series as the document itself is laid out, give you an overview of all the contents that you'll find within it. And then at the end of that, we'll get into the next steps. And as Donna mentioned, she'll provide you with a fairly clear overview of all the different steps in the process that need to be the official plan adopted. As I go through the presentation today, feel free to stop and ask any questions you'd like. I don't know, Chair, if you would like those to go through you, or if you would rather people just raise their hand or speak out if they have a question. But more than happy to have it be more of a dialogue if you're okay with that.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'd say just keep it casual and people just, just shout out the questions for you for sure. Thank you for asking.
Perfect. All right, I take no offense. Interrupt me. More than happy to answer the questions in situ. Sometimes that's easier. For those who were paying attention to council just before the Christmas break, I provided a slightly longer presentation, a slightly longer slide deck to the exact same effect here, overviewing the draft official plan with council. So again, if anyone has any more specific details that they're interested in hearing about, we cover the full breadth of content here, just in a slightly more succinct version, appreciating there's only about an hour in today's meeting. So in terms of the process that we actually undertook to develop the draft official plan, as I mentioned, we started in 2022, so just a little over 2 years engaged in this project now. And the general timeline that we take for documents such as this, no matter where we're doing them, really begins with the draft, or sorry, not the draft, the original official plan analysis. So you take the document that you already have, you look at it, you do a review on it, you make sure you understand what is working in it, what isn't working, and what's kind of working but maybe just needs some tweaks. And from there, you're able to develop a sense of what do we need to talk to the public about? What are the things that might be changing more? What are the things that might be changing less? What are the things that the public is really concerned about that we should be incorporating and considering as we develop the document? And what are the things that we maybe don't have in it right now that we really should be adding in? And from there, we actually begin drafting policies up. We bring that very preliminary draft document back to the public for a second phase of engagement, and we did that in March of 2023. From there, refinements. So again, this is a very iterative process as we work through official plans. You don't get them right the first time, and it is really important to make sure there are these touch points where you have the dialogue and you get the feedback from as many different actors as you can. And then ultimately end up doing an engagement on what we call the final draft in the spring of last year. So since that time in the spring, we've been undergoing an additional series of reviews and revisions and consultations with senior levels of government and the administration of the city of Charlottetown itself. And we've landed in the place where we are today, which is with this complete full draft official plan that we are now requesting your permission to begin that formal adoption process with. As I mentioned, there's a lot of inputs that go into creating these documents, and really there's three core elements that feed into the draft that you have before you today. And as I mentioned, these are that public engagement. So there's these really important questions that we ask to the public and then have them respond to, which are about the opportunities, challenges, and ideas that they have for the city of Charlottetown and for the plan. And then as we work through the planning process, the actual plan drafts themselves, which we brought back twice to the public. There's the actual official plan that is in effect right now, so the current document from 1999, and that's been updated over time in the past 26 years. So again, taking the directions that remain relevant from that document, carrying them forward, tweaking the ones that are kind of working, and really working to replace and improve the ones that aren't. And then lastly, there is this fundamental analysis and research component that goes into this. So alongside myself and the O2 planning team, we'd also retained some land economists, Turner Drake, who helped to inform a lot of the growth management elements of the official plan. We had engineers involved, heritage consultants, and local planning consultants as well to ensure that we were getting a fulsome 360 view of all the different elements, both technical and more soft, that go into creating these documents and ensuring they reflect the place that we're planning for. So, as I mentioned, the final plan. This is the draft that we're bringing forward for adoption. I want to be clear, this has undergone several rounds of review. So we've had 2 phases of public engagement on this. There's been substantial administrative review internal to the city. The province has looked at copies of this, and we have had that public review. But that doesn't mean that this is an immutable plan. Change can still be made. That's part of the statutory process that exists in Prince Edward Island. And this public meeting component that we're asking you to approve is a key part of that. That gives the public the ability to come forward, say their bit about the plan, and then the project team has the opportunity to take everything that we hear at that public meeting and make further revisions as we move the plan along the process. So this is not the lockdown, nothing can ever change plan, but it is the final plan in the sense that it's the one that we're moving forward through this final approvals process. So with that, I'll hop into the draft official plan overview unless anyone has any questions about that process. As Donna mentioned, she will be giving a little more detail and color to the actual approvals process at the end of the plan, or sorry, at the end of the presentation though. And hearing none, I'll keep going with the draft official plan overview itself. So the official plan itself is divided into 6 distinct chapters. I'll be going through them, as I mentioned, in series. So the first one is fairly simple. It's the actual introduction to the document itself. So this is really a framing component to the plan. This outlines for anyone who's reading it, whether you're the public or a developer or council or staff, why we have an official plan, how we actually put it together, what you need to know to be able to actually use the document. So again, whether you're a counselor who is administering the actual application of it, if you're a developer interpreting it for your developments, or if you're just a member of the public who wants to know what to do with your property, that outlines a little bit of how that all works and how you can actually engage with it and understand what it's saying. There's also an overview of how this document works with the zoning and development bylaw and how it works with the other plans and strategies that the city has. So it is important to note the official plan, it's a 10,000-foot plan, right? Like it sits at a really high level and it looks at the entire city in its entirety. But it doesn't exist in isolation. So it really needs to consider and understand a lot of the different plans, the strategies, the policies that are in effect, and to the extent possible, really try to pull those things together and create very cohesive and very specific, clear direction for where the city should be going. Moving on from that framing chapter, we get into the vision and goals. So whereas that first chapter is saying, here's why we have an official plan, here's what it does, here's how it works, the vision and goals gets into here's what it's going to do. So really this chapter is, I call it the North Star of the entire official plan. It introduces the actual aspirational future, so the vision for where the city of Charlottetown wants to find itself, should the plan's implementation be successful. And then it also produces and provides goals. So these are actually lenses, if you will, ways to look at the plan that have guided the overall development of the content within it. So if you were to actually open up the official plan, read individual policies, you might not explicitly see the words and the goals and the words and the vision repeated verbatim in those policies, but taken in aggregate and taken in chapters and smaller bite-sized chunks, you should be able to largely see reflected in the entire body of the official plan the ideas that these goals and then the vision of that aspirational future are really trying to make happen in Charlottetown. So to start with, the vision statement is that Charlottetown is a community for all. Fairly simple, fairly succinct, and then unpacking that just a step further, we have this paragraph underneath it that says, no matter where in the city residents live, all enjoy and benefit from diverse and attainable housing, economic opportunity, safe and sustainable transportation choices, beautiful public spaces, healthy natural and conservation areas, and a unique historic culture and charm. And again, this is that aspirational state. So this is, 15 years from now, we're looking back and how did the official plan work? We'll know that we were successful if we can say to ourselves honestly, this is a place where, we have diverse and attainable housing. There is accessible, safe, sustainable transportation choices for all. The beautiful public spaces are still there. They've been enhanced. The historic culture and charm has been enhanced and improved. That is really what we're talking about with a vision. And its job, as I mentioned, is to frame up that aspirational future and provide a framework for the goals themselves. So the lenses that we look at all the policy of. So the goals, there's 6. They are to grow efficiently. What that means is to increase density and housing choice in locations with existing servicing, transportation, and public spaces. So providing residents with choices in where they live and how they move, but doing it in a really responsible and, quite frankly, intelligent way. So where is the infrastructure? That's where growth should primarily go. We're also talking with these goals about adapting to climate change, so considering the impacts and building resiliency into the community. So trying to mitigate the worst effects and protect lives for people and from the effects of climate change themselves. When we talk about advancing social equity and inclusivity, we mean prioritizing diverse needs, desires, and stories of all residents in planning decisions, public investment, and heritage protection. Or that 4th one, being fiscally sustainable, means maximizing the use of Charlottetown's existing footprint, infrastructure, and assets. Again, so accommodating a growing, changing population in a way that makes sense and best leverages the investments we've already made in the city. The fifth one, ensuring environmental sustainability, means protecting the city's natural systems and areas to support the health of all living things. So also improving air quality, water quality, and providing residents opportunities to connect with nature. And then lastly, protecting our natural and physical heritage assets and resources. And what that means is recognizing, celebrating, and investing in the things that make Charlottetown unique and ensuring they remain for future generations to cherish and enjoy. And I think that's a really important piece in particular, that notion of making sure that we're not just identifying things we like now, we're identifying things we like now. And the plan is trying to make sure to the extent possible that they're still is successfully implemented, it will mean that the Charlottetown we enjoy today is still recognizable in that 15-year time horizon. So with that real framing front end matter of the document put aside, we get into, like I said, the real crux of things here, the land use strategy. So this is where you see the map that has all the colors on it, and this really dictates the what and the where of what can happen in Charlottetown going forward. So this entire chapter, taken as a whole, as I mentioned, it provides residents about knowledge about what can happen in their neighborhood. So if you were just a member of the public opening up this document, the land use strategy will likely be the one that's most relevant to you, just in terms of, hey, you know what, I own a house over here, or I live in an apartment building over here. What could happen in my property? What could happen near me in my neighborhood? And this chapter helps to answer that question. Same thing for landowners or developers. What are the opportunities that exist to me with the land that I have? This elucidates a little bit of that, right? It gives light to what you are actually able to do with your land. And then from a city staff and a council perspective, it provides you parameters around growth. So it really articulates where should you be okay with certain things happening and where should you say, no, you know what, maybe that's not actually fitting the vision that we've established and all together decided is the right way for Charlottetown to go forward. And it gives policy language for both council and city staff to be able to fall back on and say, no, here's why that isn't appropriate. Actually, you know what, here's why it's a really great idea and we're going to help you make this happen. So without further ado, here's the map itself. The future land use map includes 10 designations with a couple sub-designations in the downtown category. And what these do is they outline the types and uses and forms of development. So wherever you see that color, that is what that thing as. It contains a certain set of policies that are, in effect, the rules for that land use. It's important to remember at an official plan level, again, we are still operating at that 10,000 foot level. So although we're getting more granular, right, you're seeing parcel by parcel allocation of these designations, what we're not doing is getting into the real nitty gritty of zoning and development bylaw questions. So we're not saying the setback should be this much and the height should be explicitly this many meters. We provide framing devices for those things. You will see as you skim through the document, in some cases, we're talking in generalities about stories, but we're not sculpting the buildings. We're not really getting articulate with the policy. That's something that belongs at a more close to the ground level, like in the zoning and development bylaw. At a 10,000 foot level, then, what we are doing with this land use map is we're trying to incorporate core planning principles to the overall growth trajectory of the city of Charlottetown. So the big changes that you'll notice looking at this map versus previous iterations of planning for Charlottetown is we're really reflecting what's called a complete communities approach to growth. So we're trying to create those conditions where no matter where you live in Charlottetown, you are able to access most of your daily needs in a fairly close distance. So you have the choice if you want. You can walk, you can bike, you can drive, but it's all fairly close to you. If you need to get a cup of sugar or go to the corner store to get a gallon of milk, that's easily available to you no matter where you are. And then the other thing we do is we've really focused in on what's called a nodes and corridors growth model. So that's one of the most evident things in this map. You'll see these pink strings that go here. Those are the corridors. They're linear stretches of heightened development entitlement. So basically you can do more development here than you can in those light yellow areas. And the reason that they're prioritized is because they're the areas, again, when we talked about that efficient use of infrastructure, that fiscally responsible use of infrastructure, they're the places that have the pipes in the ground, they have the road capacity to support increased density. So they're places where the city won't need to bear significant increases in infrastructure investments because they've already been made. The capacity is there to support the development. When we talk about nodes, that's just where those two intersect. So where these roads come together, are areas that are truly best suited and best able to accommodate those most substantial increases in growth and density in the city. And again, the intention there is really twofold. It's leverage those existing investments in all that infrastructure, and B, also prioritize and concentrate the growth and density in these core areas where A, you'll be able to reach critical masses of local services. So ideally that means, maybe you get a doctor's office there, maybe you get the grocery store, maybe you get those things that allow all the communities around it to have close and immediate access to those daily needs. And then B, you largely preserve the existing vernacular of most of the city of Charlottetown. And that's a really fancy way to say we leave most neighborhoods alone that way. The growth, the change, the density gets concentrated in those key arterials, and then established neighborhoods generally, when this mode is implemented effectively, experience less intense change throughout the course of these plans. So I will in series go through the land use zones here and provide just a high-level overview of what they mean. Again, if you would like at any point in time, just speak out if you have any questions or any clarifying, any clarifications, I guess, sought from myself or Donna. So the first three zones that you see here on the slide deck are the downtown, Eastern Gateway, and then the corridors themselves. Downtown, we have three subzones. So there's the downtown core, the downtown periphery, and the downtown waterfront. And really, the key idea with that one is to support the downtown's really dual role. It's a destination, but it is also a neighborhood. And I think those two things are important to keep in mind and to balance. There's tremendous value, both socially, culturally, and economically imbued in the downtown. It's one of the most desirous places for visitors to come and see, and from that tourism aspect. But it is also the economic heart of the city. So balancing how that growth happens in a way that respects and reflects the 500 lot area, and really seeks to actually expand that built form and that typology further out from the core, if possible, in those periphery areas, is really important. So respecting the built heritage, promoting development that complements the way that the downtown already is, instead of contradicts or contrasts too sharply from it. The Eastern Gateway, just to that east end of the downtown core, primarily is a designation meant to say, look, the Eastern Gateway secondary plan is not that old, just follow it. So we're integrating the design measures to protect the shoreline, we're ensuring that the development is responding to coastal flood risk, but by and large saying with this designation, the plan is the plan, let's follow that, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here with this official plan. At the corridor level, what we're doing is, as I mentioned, we're providing that mixed residential and commercial uses along those key transportation routes. So actually, one of the benefits I didn't mention is that in concentrating density to these corridors as well, one of the things that you also achieve over time is you increase the overall viability of transit service. So again, instead of sprinkling people all over the city, you're saying, no, actually, we're going to try to focus some of these core areas, and then buses can be allocated very strategically to those key routes, and A, you have more riders on them, and B, it means that your buses are focused in specific areas instead of having to go all over the place to capture everyone. Again, just another aspect of that efficient use of existing resources that we have. Next three land use zones here, we'll talk about the nodes, neighborhoods, and workscapes. So the nodes, as I mentioned, it's where those corridors intersect. So I'll circle them on the map if you can see my cursor. Again, as discussed, it's those really core areas that are best suited where these major roads interconnect with each other, where we're identifying locations that are opportune for what we're calling landmark built environments. The major idea here is to support the highest densities in the city. By and large, these are locations from an infrastructural standpoint. Again, your pipes in the ground, your road widths, your accesses to these lots, and then just the parcel sizes, like the actual land blocks around them themselves, that are well suited to actually support more comprehensive, more master planned, and more higher scale developments generally. Again, the intention with these nodes is to accommodate a broad mix of land uses. So this is truly meant to be these mixed use kind of secondary or tertiary commercial centers around the city where people can go get their groceries, go to the physiotherapist, they can go to the eye doctor, those kinds of things. But also putting the residential densities on top of them to support it. So introducing something that actually in a lot of ways is sort of replicating what's always been in the 500 lot area at just a more contemporary 2025 scale in other parts of Charlottetown. That next one, the neighborhoods, that's that light yellow I was talking about. So this is the lion's share of the actual land base in the city of Charlottetown. The idea being embedded here in this zone is to embrace predominantly low-density residential character of these areas. This doesn't mean that no change will happen to these areas. That's something that I should be really clear about. As part of this project with the Housing Accelerator Fund monies that help to fund both this OP project and other major initiatives of the city, there was need to adopt a minimum density for those yellow areas. So lots are able to accommodate up to 4 units as of right. But again, the nuance of that will be further articulated through the zoning and development bylaw. There is more regulation in place that will come down the road. The official plan, again, sets the guidelines and sets the guardrails really for how that will be implemented across the city. And what we're saying in this document then for that kinds of development is that it's the residential character matters. So the gentle infill development we're all for. We're very supportive of it, but there is this need to be looking at low-rise compatible housing forms in these neighborhoods. And I do think that's really important. One thing we did hear loud and clear from people is that they value the character of their neighborhoods, and that's not something that we're trying to change with this plan. I want to be really clear. The whole emphasis and thrust of the nodes and corridors model is that we're not doing that. But we are allowing these opportunities to incorporate garden suites, secondary suites, duplexes, different types of housing that historically might not be the norm in all parts of Charlottetown. That sixth land use zone is this Workscapes one. So that's the purple that you see primarily in the north end up by the airport, over in the West Gateway and the Eastern Gateway. These are reserve lands, for lack of a better word, for commercial and light industrial operations. We're saying we're setting these areas aside. In a lot of contexts, they're already existing industrial and commercial locations, but we're saying we need places where businesses can still come to set up in Charlottetown, create jobs, and generate revenue for the city. So we're maintaining environments where many different types of commercial and light industrial businesses can all coexist, and notionally these are employment hubs. So what we don't want to do in these areas is put a new residential subdivision in the middle of them, because that will just create conflict of uses. What we do want is to allow things like trucks to be able to get in there. We're creating road right-of-ways and the conditions that allow them to move in and out and throughout these not neighborhoods, but industrial neighborhoods, and efficiently, and generally then creating conditions where we can attract more of those types of uses primarily to those locations. So again, it's sorting out the land uses throughout the city in a way that leverages the existing land base we have, make the best use of the higher scale or higher intensity infrastructure that's often required to service employment land, without putting residential in somewhere that has really, really high voltage electricity that's best suited for more intensive industrial uses, and just creating conditions where employment will be able to come to and set shop in Charlottetown. Final four land use zones now. Institutional. So these are the blue ones that you see. UPEI is the biggest chunk that sticks out when you're looking at the map, but they are sprinkled throughout the entirety of the city. The intention of this zone is to allow for institutional uses to not just continue to exist, but ideally to thrive. We want to minimize the barriers and requirements for institutions that are using their space. So if they have really good ideas or really exciting and innovative things that they'd like to accomplish with their lands, whether that's different kinds of integrating housing into their assets, whether it's just finding new ways to expand the social services or the recreational services or whatever services they may be providing, we're really keen on allowing that to happen. So this zone is opening up for institutional uses the ability to use their land in ways that allows them to amplify the impact of whatever their institutional mission is. The next zone is parks and public space. So these are the light green that you're seeing, so not these darker ones, but the actual light green components. What we're doing here with this zone, protecting, managing, and enhancing all areas of recreational value. So parks are great. That's not really a point of contention. Everyone loves their parks. Most people want more parks. So what we're saying with this zone is, okay, those are great. Let's keep them in place. Let's continue investing in them. But one thing that we're introducing through the policy language in this zone as well is how can we strategically expand the park network, but in a way that really leans in on filling gaps and expanding and even better connecting the mobility network. So how can we use parks to create, more active transportation corridors to help people get through and across the city? How can we identify the areas that are least serviced by parks right now, so the people basically who are furthest away from parks, and prioritize acquisition of those locations? And again, the official plan doesn't provide all of the answers for these directions or these questions, but it does set a framework and a bit of a trajectory for where a future parks and open space or parks and rec master plan could take this direction and say, okay, great, now we're going to dive into the nitty gritty. We're going to come up with the exact answer for how and where and all these things. The second to last zone is the natural areas one. So these are those darker green ones that I was talking about previously. These are natural areas that should be protected. So where possible, looking at integrated watershed management to ensure particularly those river courses, riverine areas are well taken care of and not being built on. That's, again, there's a bit of a twofold reason for that. The first and foremost is the innate environmental value that they bring. So not compromising the ecological integrity of those locations, and then secondly, just improving and protecting public safety. So not building in places that are prone to flooding, not building in places that are prone to environmental effects. You don't want slips or slides or anything washing people into creeks. And then the second bullet that you see for natural areas, and another key component of this, natural areas and parks and public spaces often go hand in hand. A member of the public traversing through an area of both likely can't really tell the difference from one to the next or see that invisible line when they're crossing. And that's because ideally we're also maintaining public accessibility to these natural areas where that won't compromise their ecological value. So again, we want people to get down to the water. We want people to be able to be in natural spaces along those water courses, along those shorelines. So creating a policy condition that says, yes, that is good in these areas, again, where it's not diminishing the ecological integrity of those places. Lastly, the urban expansion area is a land use zone we've introduced in this official plan. And these are those gray areas, largely in the furthest extents of the city boundaries that you see here. The idea with these fiscal responsibility. It's about establishing a process to transition unserviced lands from unserviced areas that provide physical, social, and environmental value to the city. So they're requiring being introduced for secondary planning when these areas redevelop. Says, okay, you can't just near subdivision down this road, or we need you to be able to articulate how this will fit into a comprehensively developed area up in this part of the city. We need to understand how it's providing the densities or providing the commercial or employment lands necessary to help pay for itself long term. This is a very standard planning practice in most parts of the country now, and what it does is, as I mentioned, it protects the financial standing of the city, but it also ensures that the people who end up living in that neighborhood are living in a complete community where they can get to parks, they can easily get jobs, and where we're all thinking comprehensively and across property boundaries and parcel lines about the overall environmental impact of the developments that we're doing as well. So preserving those linear corridors, preserving water creeks and courses, and again, ideally integrating them into pathways and other things that allow people to engage with that nature and live with it instead of completely paving it on a lot by lot basis. So those are the land use zones themselves. In this land strategy or growth strategy component of the plan, there are two other chapters. The first one is transportation. The second one gets more into the engineering side of things and the servicing infrastructure. With the transportation is really about transportation for all. So you would have heard that earlier in the vision statement itself. So here's where you see it actually come out a little more clearly. The idea with this one is that we're just trying to create the policy conditions that really points and directs the city towards finding ways to improve modal choice for residents. So we're not saying that people need to get out of their cars, we're not forcing them to, but we are saying, what if we made it easier to walk to where you're going? What if we made it easier and safer to bike to wherever you wanted to go? Introducing the conditions that allow for those kinds of decisions to be made and to be natural decisions is a key component of this. We're also talking about generally providing that efficient and effective transportation network for people and goods. So there is a fundamental service and purpose to the entirety of the transportation network that helps to, create economic activity, to create incentives and desirability of those employment lands themselves. We need to make sure that that's okay. And then lastly, there's this notion of actually maximizing the use of the transportation assets and services that we have already. So before we're extending into those new undeveloped areas, those gray zones that we were just talking about, let's make sure we're finding highest and best use for everything that we've already got built in the ground today too. And then lastly for this section, the servicing infrastructure itself. So this focuses again on making the most efficient use of the things that we have. So it's providing safe and reliable water, wastewater, and stormwater servicing. Also building resiliency into that network itself too, though. So when we talk about climate change, when we talk about the impacts of increasing severe storms and hurricanes hitting the island, what is Charlottetown's vulnerabilities and how do we make sure that we're working to mitigate them? And then again, maximizing the use of these services before we extend them. New pipes are very expensive. Developers are more than happy to put them in up front and then sell their homes, but the long-term liability falls on the city. And that's okay. That's the way that development and growth works. But the city then just needs to be making sure that where those developments are happening, they're happening in a way that the existing assets to the extent possible, and making sure it's making informed and intelligent decisions about laying down new infrastructure into the future. So from there, we move into the fourth chapter of the official plan. Land use is pretty big. That's the largest chunk. The second largest chunk are these subject areas. The way that we really like to think about them and break them down is, I mean, land speaks for itself. The land use is talking about the land. So this is the where, what, why, and how of your properties, what you can do with the actual physical land base. The subject area policy switches over into a slightly softer aspect of citywide planning. This is getting into a lot more of the, I want to say, operational elements of what the city does. So this is talking about arts and culture. It's talking about supporting economic development. It's heritage. It's all of those different things, all that exist around the land uses themselves, but are not specifically the land use. So in here, we have 7 different subject area chapters or subchapters, I guess. They are urban form, arts and culture, heritage, recreation, housing, economic development, and then sustainability and climate resilience. And similar to with the land use side of things, these are providing high level direction. So by and large, these are areas where there might already exist or there might in the future exist more specific strategies or special plans or policies that relate to all these topic areas. The official plan's intent and purpose is to, again, it's setting guardrails. It's saying, here is the arena that we would like you to be thinking in and operating in when you talk about housing or when you talk about investments and recreation in the city. So the first 2 are urban form and arts and culture. When we talk about the urban form subject area policies, one of the biggest things that is recommended as part of this official plan is to create general urban design guidelines for the entirety of the city. So urban design is something that it's important everywhere in planning, but in Charlottetown in particular, a wealth and importance of historical, beautiful urbanism that exists, and in many ways really is the catalyzing force of the tourism economy in the city. How do we find ways to not just protect that, but enhance it and then expand it outward from that core and ensure that new development helps to further complement and improve and enhance and promote that reputation of Charlottetown as a truly beautiful city? Part and parcel with that, we're also saying there needs to be a review function for new development in specific areas of the city. So this is not regulatory oversight on everything, but what we are saying is, especially in places like those nodes, so where we are anticipating some fairly large-scale development over the next 15 years, let's make sure that we're providing a slightly more rigorous urban design review component to that so that these developments are getting done right and they are getting done in a way that contributes positively to the city. More generally, this section also includes policies around supporting the visual environments of the city itself. So again, high aesthetic quality, making sure that we're creating a very visually appealing city and maintaining what we already have. And also incorporating elements of things like accessibility into urban design better than we might have historically in the past. And generally what this means is we're not requiring, we're not forcing anything. We don't want to create barriers to providing development and growth in the city, but it does mean creating conditions and even just checklists and opportunities to work through with developers and investments in any kinds of community investment. Thinking about things like accessibility, thinking about things like urban design, thinking about things like how do the planters hit the ground, how are they contributing to the overall aesthetic beauty of Charlottetown, and those are all elements that you'll see in this urban form category. The arts and culture side of things really focuses on committing to the ongoing implementation of the arts and cultural priorities that have been picked out by the city. So this is one of those cases where we had a fairly recent strategy and plan in place to replace it or to repeal it. We're really trying to work with the good work that's already been done by the city and by the arts community in Charlottetown. So really saying, okay, you know what, these priorities they've identified are good. Keep going, lean in. Above and beyond that, one of the things that we do address in this chapter is really trying to get into this notion of all seasons activation. Winter cities and just also shoulder city activation are really big things, not just in tourism economies, but anywhere in the country nowadays. The more that you invest in those things and the more that you see this activation and activity happening all year round instead of just in summers, the more you improve quality of life for everyone. That includes people who call Charlottetown home. So it's about creating a more vibrant, more culturally exciting, interesting, and distinct city 365 days of the year. The next two subject area policies, heritage and recreation. From a heritage standpoint, we're really focused on expanding the formal heritage identification process. So what is the heritage in Charlottetown that is, I don't want to say falling through the cracks, but maybe could use a little bit more love and a little bit more focus to ensure that we're able to retain those key assets. Also continuing to support the actual heritage conservation and recognition of assets themselves, so elevating, repeating, and amplifying the stories of the past, especially through that built form, and then appreciating that there is a balance required between success in tourism and accommodating growth. These are really major pressures on the city. They're really important things to embrace and to leverage. But the heritage chapter is saying, let's make sure that we're leveraging and embracing them in a way that helps to, again, it's enhancing and amplifying what we already have instead of diminishing or potentially contradicting. From a rec standpoint, developing and enhancing sports and rec facilities to meet wider programming needs, something that we heard throughout our engagement. The city has a lot of really great recreational facilities and amenities. It has a lot of really great parks. People always want to use them even more. So what are the things they're really programming for as much as we could? What are the potential gaps? These are the things that we're saying should be looked at a little bit further in future planning work the city does. The city is growing and changing and diversifying as well. So inherently, there will just be changing interests in what the priorities are for the use of these spaces. At the same time, there was also a very clear desire for people to be able to get to those spaces better. So we talk about improving and connecting trails for the safe and increased use by the public. People are fine with driving to get to the arena or to get to the soccer field, but there are also contexts where they say, you know what, like this isn't that far away from my house. I would love to be able to just bike with my kids to get there. That kind of language is what you're hearing, or sorry, what you are responding to with the policy language in the document that speaks to those kinds of things. Tying over a little bit more onto the ECDES side as well, there is this interest in developing and promoting rec activities year-round, so making it, again, a 12-month of the year, 365 city, both for residents and for visitors, and that ties into the actual sport tourism aspect as well. So leveraging the assets the city has to attract more people, to host tournaments, to host events, those kinds of things in the city. Next two policy areas, housing and economic development. Housing is a really, really, really important one. This is an issue that probably isn't going to be going away anytime soon over the plan horizon that we're looking at with this OP. So ensuring that we're doing as much as we can to get that full housing spectrum delivered is really important. So enabling that greater housing choice throughout the city is a really huge first step. That will help in many different ways to provide housing affordability and also just housing options. When we look in those yellow areas and we talk about incorporating garden suites, the land economics of secondary suites and garden suites often don't make sense for private capital. The developers themselves will likely not be going back and retrofitting many of those, but they're filling an incredibly important gap where children buy the house from their parents and then with some of that capital put a granny suite in the back for their parents to live in, because many houses in Charlottetown are split levels. They're inaccessible dwellings. If you build a new dwelling in the back that is accessible, and we have a regulatory framework in Charlottetown that allows for that to happen, you're able to actually accommodate a lot of housing need in very sensitive and in some ways almost invisible ways. The other end of the housing spectrum is looking at ensuring we're providing housing for all and leveraging mechanisms that may exist now or may exist in the future in both city policy and provincial statute to ensure that larger scale developments, again, thinking of those nodes in particular, are contributing in some meaningful way to affordable housing is something that should really be investigated and leveraged as well in the future. So again, improving affordability, enabling greater housing choice, and allowing and facilitating, so being an advocate and a champion for developing the full spectrum of housing options is a really important component of this. On the economic development side of things, really this is about collaboration. It's not necessarily the city's job in and of itself to promote economic development. Funding and supporting active groups and organizations is an important part, but ultimately it's private capital that does the developing component of economic development, right? So who are these stakeholders? How do we work closely with them? How do we ensure that when it comes to, innovate, PEI, invest in Charlottetown, it is everyone singing from the same songbook, everyone pulling in the same direction. So collaboration is really what this policy direction is pushing. And that looks like really dialing into and drilling down on the things that Charlottetown is already doing really well. So what are your existing industries? What are the things that are really what you should be leaning into? And those are largely tourism, the knowledge economy with the university and the college, and the healthcare that exists in the Charlottetown area. So double down on that and provide every opportunity to help support their growth and their expansion. Going hand in hand with that, supporting the development of manufacturing and skilled labor. So if we're building new things, one of the ones that immediately comes to mind in a Charlottetown context, if you're building above 6 stories in Canada right now, the building code says you need to go concrete. There's not a lot of people doing concrete development in PEI right now. How is that something that you might be able to foster and build as an industry in Charlottetown instead of relying on mainland talent or mainland expertise? Same vein, foster a business-friendly environment generally, so provide conditions and be supportive of the kinds of investment that will help to grow the local economy. And then, of course, here you're seeing it again, support that year-round tourism. Year-round tourism, not year-end tourism. Final subject area policy is sustainability and climate resilience one. So looking at greenhouse gas emission reduction more generally, building more climate resilient communities as well, getting that tree canopy coverage up. Obviously that it took a bit of a hit from Hurricane Fiona, and in general with new development you don't always see the degree of tree canopy implementation that you would always like to see. There's a lot of different ways that you can address that. You can require new developments to have certain amounts of tree coverage, but you can also even change the city's engineered standards for roads themselves to always include trees in that right of way. So how are we able to introduce those kinds of elements into our planning work and our development work in the city is something this looks at. There's also an interest in more generally providing not just public accessibility to natural areas, so like the waterfronts, the shorelines, but also preserving those wildlife corridors that exist in the city as well. So ensuring that wildlife can move through the city and there aren't isolated pockets that get cut off and in some ways entrap wildlife within certain pockets of Charlottetown is something that's being considered through this policy language. And then future-proofing the city itself from the impacts of climate change. And again, those take a bit of a triple bottom line approach and perspective as well. There are financial, social, and environmental. And making sure that we're thinking about them and introducing policy that is responsive to them is important. So those are the subject area policies in a nutshell. I apologize for how much talking I've been doing on here to get through them all. I promise the last couple of sections here are a lot quicker. So Chapter 5, secondary plans, really just focuses on how they should be developed and employed. So as I mentioned, those gray areas on the edges of the city, the urban expansion, will require secondary plans going forward, the adoption of them by council before future development and growth can happen. And this lays out the rule book for what that looks like. And then the last chapter, implementation. This is looking at a lot of different elements of that successful application. Official plans are living documents. They're dynamic. We like to say in our office, we don't hard bind them. We only coil them. They're meant to be flexible. But what that flexibility looks at and requires then is a lot of ongoing review and assurance that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So that looks like interdepartmental collaboration internally to the city. Administration needs to be talking to each other and talking amongst themselves to ensure that they're all still pulling in that same direction. And that goes hand in hand with things like informed decision making by council and senior leadership, as well as the asset management of all the city's assets and resources. The implementation section also looks at the rulebook for the zoning and development bylaw transition. So this official plan gets adopted, and there's a bit of a gap until the zoning and development bylaw project wraps up itself, where there's an old zoning bylaw and a new official plan. That's okay. That's normal. That happens across the country, everywhere that these projects happen. But you need to have specific considerations for how you interpret the zoning and development bylaw in the interim. And then we also look at things like ongoing reconciliation with First Nations groups, ongoing public engagement, broader regional collaboration, and then, of course, the monitoring of the official plan itself. So for the next steps, I have a slide here Donna once I wrap this up to provide a little more detail and specific nuance to this. But as we mentioned, the public meeting is really the request here today that we're asking for. And then following that, there is further revision that would happen. Independent of the official plan project is a separate zoning and development bylaw project that will implement through those regulations the land use side of this. And sorry, that is the end of the official plan summary. If anyone has any questions or comments at this time, I would welcome them, but otherwise, Donna, I'll turn it over to you just to discuss the next steps in the project.
Okay, thank you, Nick. So per Section 11 of the Planning Act of PEI, it stipulates that before a recommendation to adopt the official plan, the planning board shall allow residents and other interested persons an opportunity to provide representation by facilitating at least one public meeting. So what is a resident? So a resident is a person who has attained the age of 18 years and is ordinarily a resident within the boundaries of the municipality. An interested person is an individual, department, or organization who may be affected by or perceive itself to be affected by a decision, activity, or outcome of this official plan project. If the council approves the request to have the new draft official plan for the city of Charlottetown proceed to the recommended / stipulated public meeting, the Planning and Heritage Department shall notify the public of said public meeting per Section 11(2) of the Planning Act of PEI. So therefore, in conclusion, the Planning and Heritage Department requests that the Planning Board recommend to Council that the new draft official plan for the city of Charlottetown proceed to public meeting per Section 11 of the Planning Act of the Province of Prince Edward Island to commence the official plan adoption process. So we can take questions if there are any, and
Thanks.
Madam Chair, over
Thanks.
to you.
Thanks, Donna. And we'll open it up now for questions to either Nicholas, who's still online with us, or with our managers, or if there's anything myself or the other elected officials on the committee, on the board can answer. You'll also have lots of opportunity once this does proceed, if it proceeds to public consultation, for more questions once we go through the public hearing perspective of things. I just want to remind folks that the questions that you do have today should be about the official plan, not to get yourself into the weeds of the zoning and development bylaw, which is a completely different nuts and bolts of the city going forward. So I'll just open it up now to questions, and so let's go from there.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Sim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is for Nicholas. Nicholas, have you considered, I know you hired an economist to drafting the official plan. Just wondering, because the growth scenario has changed, obviously because of the changes to the federal, policies, and to a great extent the provincial policies as well. So have you incorporated that into, the very recent set of datas into the official plan?
Yeah, this is a great question. Things have been changing so quickly on that front across the country, and Charlottetown's no exception, right? It was one of the fastest growing CMAs over the past census period, I think 7.5% leading into this, and it's accelerated. So to answer your question, have we considered this? Have we updated our numbers? The answer is yes, absolutely. One of the things that we try to do with particularly the nodes and corridors approach to development when we're engaging that model is, I don't want to call it over-designating, because that's absolutely not what's happened here. But if we anticipate that, maybe 3 nodes will grow out over the next 15 years, we'll identify 4, we'll identify 5, because nodes don't have to all be, 50-story towers, and that's not what we're not recommending that at all in Charlottetown. But they can develop at different levels of densities and intensities, and not every landowner will be ready to go over the 10 or 15-year horizon that we're planning for either. So whereas our numbers projected for a most conservative growth scenario, an additional 8,000 or so residents by 2036, we're accommodating more than that in the plan. That doesn't mean that more people will come to Charlottetown. It doesn't mean that every single area we've identified for growth in Charlottetown will grow to the maximums of the official plan. But we've created the buffer space where, whether it's the conservative growth scenario, the most ambitious one, or the most ambitious one plus, there is capacity in the plan right now to be able to respond to those changes. So the consideration is there. It has been made, and this plan is, whether we stay status quo, whether it goes up, as it has been over the last little while, able to support it. In a world where the borders were completely open and we were adding 100,000 people to Charlottetown, you would need a new plan. But that is such an outside the realm of where we're considering right now possibility, where ideally the city would be doing a new plan at that point anyway. But I would say generally we don't need to worry about the ability of the plan to respond to an even slightly higher rate of growth than we've had right now. The capacity of the plan to do so has been baked in.
And thank you for that, Nicholas, but I'm just wondering because, some of the numbers which are coming out has actually predicted a negative growth. And, and that could very well change the dynamics how the city grows in the next couple of years. And as with the new plan, just wondering if the numbers from The Economist anticipates that, projected negative growth.
So I would say that none of the work that we were doing was anticipating a negative growth rate. That's something that we weren't really seeing. But I honestly don't recall having seen that at this point of the project. In terms of the planning work we're doing, though, I would argue the framework that we put in place in terms of that efficient use of existing resources, though, that always makes sense generally. You should just always be using your stuff as most efficiently and effectively as you can. In a world where the city of Charlottetown were to decline or to shrink in population, it becomes all the more important, though, to ensure that you're concentrating your growth on those core areas, and you're definitely not extending out into greenfield development that would cause even more economic hardship long term.
Right.
So while I can't tell you that we were planning with decline in mind for this OP, I would argue that it's still very well capable of accommodating a future scenario like that. It's a plan that's really focused on growth occurring and responding to it, but the policy framework of it is not committing the city to investments that would be ill-informed in a negative growth scenario.
Okay, no, thank you so much for that. And I was also wondering, what about the integrated financial planning? I know you have asset management plan as part of, and all the other, policies. Just wondering how integrated financial planning plays a role in this official plan, because a lot of things would be linked to the financial health of the municipality moving forward.
Yeah, the document is, as you pointed out, it's a fairly high-level document, but it does speak to those kinds of things, and it's the urban expansion where that becomes really important. So we have very clear policy from a city standpoint. The city needs to maintain and actually improve its asset management programs, particularly when it's looking at the financial implications of urban expansion. So that's, I would say, probably the most key consideration. But more generally, we do include policies through here that are saying there needs to be a formal asset management framework for all services, infrastructure, and facilities, focusing on that efficient use. It's not the job of the official plan to articulate exactly what that is, but we're really trying to be clear that every element of what the official plan looks at, so recreation facilities, right, the roads themselves, the pipes in the ground, how are they doing? Are we creating conditions that allow the city to maintain those services long term? If they're not right now, then the official plan's objective of creating a livable, enjoyable city for all that maintains or increases the enjoyment and level of service people get into the future is not true. So we speak to asset management in the sense of we support it, we advocate for it. We're particularly strong in language on urban expansion because that's where the planning component, the official plan, is a little more directive and involved in those decisions. But we aren't doing the asset management in the sense of actually putting dollars to cents or doing the detailed reviews for the OP.
No, and I agree with that. And you can't really put a dollar and cents to this. I'm just thinking from like in certain jurisdictions, and for example, Ontario, there is a cross-link between your official plan, your asset management, and your municipal, your long-term financial planning. At the end of the day, these are all interlinked and interrelated, issues. You can't provide the services or can't manage growth without having the financial health of the municipality. Now, policies should be designed by giving due consideration to all these aspects of it. I'm just want if there is specific reference to such policies in the official plan?
Yeah, so I've on the side of my desk, if you see me looking side to side, that's what I'm doing here. It's section 6.1.3 is the one in particular that I'd point your attention to. So that is the asset management element of it. And you'll see in there's 4 policies. The first one, we say prioritize infrastructure improvements and investment in areas accommodating the greatest densities of new development. So we're getting the biggest municipal bang for buck. So if someone comes in with an application at the same time as someone else, and the first one says, I need you to pay $10 million to accommodate 1,000 people, and the other one says, I need you to pay $15 million to accommodate 200 people, it's a fairly simple decision financially to make which one there. The second one is a little more specific to what you were talking about in that Ontario context, and you're exactly right. This is something BC looks at this as well, development charges, the actual cost of infrastructure carrying. For that policy, we say establish a development charges bylaw. So this is a very explicit document that focuses on how we can redistribute costs for municipal service extensions and intensification to those causing the effects. So ensuring development's paying for development, and that the city isn't getting left holding the bag on the cost of these infrastructure improvements. Third one is talking about developing that formal asset management framework. So looking at the services, infrastructure, and facilities, and then providing a focus on using them as efficiently as possible. And then the final one is a more generalized statement. The city should view asset management through a sustainability lens, so prioritizing long-term resiliency and extension of asset life cycles over those short-term cost savings. So that is one particularly salient if you're looking at a decline scenario, even though that wasn't the lens we were using. That becomes all the more important should that be the case long-term.
Great, thank you so much.
I'll put it in the chat here too. It's 6.1.3 is the asset management.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Becky.
Not exactly a question about the recommendation, but Nicholas, you mentioned that until the zoning and development bylaw is complete, that there would be some considerations that need to be made in terms of how to use the plan with the existing development bylaw. I was just wondering what those considerations are, like how would planning staff or the board evaluate an application that comes in if the plan and the bylaw are in conflict with one another?
That's a great question, Jackie, and I think Nicholas, you can take a stab at it, but I would say that's more of an operational question, but let's let Nicholas take a stab at it, then we'll move it on to Donna, David, and Mike, not to put you on the spot.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you asking that question right after asset management, because we're going to go from 6.1.3 to 6.1.4, which is the very next one. It's on the same page, even if you pulled it up. And there, it's a fairly simple process. It's effectively, we continue to issue permits under the old zones. So the old zoning and development bylaw is still the law of the land. You are able to do the things that it says. However, if you come in and you apply for a redesignation or like a land use amendment that complies with the official plan's land use framework but doesn't comply with the existing zoning bylaw, we're saying we will ensure that we're working towards allowing those transitions to happen. So we'll find ways to be able to incorporate in the interim you moving towards a designation that allows you to do the things you're talking about. We don't want to stand in the way of growth and change happening in that interim period. And then the last one is actually a little bit beside the actual transition itself, but we talk about removing the requirement for the same or similarly denied rezoning applications to not be heard within 1 year of being rejected. We remove that because the adoption of the official plan changes the conditions under which something might have been rejected. So again, it's just about ensuring, okay, we've created a condition where there now might be more permissions in some places and less in other ones. How do we make sure that any new applications aren't stopped? Like how do we continue intaking and processing and making good planning decisions while that happens? And those 3 policies try to set that framework.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anybody else? Rosemary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question around the public consultation meetings, the public meetings. I'm wondering if there should be several meetings. One meeting, lots of people might have something else going on and couldn't make a meeting.
So there's a process to which we have to follow, and that's one public meeting. Now, remember though, for the last a year and a half, we have had 2 rounds of public engagement sessions. We had a round and then 9 months later, we had another round. And that's where the public, and it was in all different areas of the city. So I think we have given the public a lot of opportunity to engage in this process. Now, unless, Donna, you can tell me something differently, from my understanding, the Planning Act states a public meeting shall be called for this type of a process,
The
so.
act states that it should be at least one,
At least one.
at least
So
one.
it
So
could be
we
more than
can
one.
have more.
We can have.
Okay, so then I guess we can leave that open. And if we discover, Rosemary, that after that, if council approves the public consultation process, if we run out of time and there's so many more people that have more questions, then we'll have another meeting.
But I think just in the spirit of transparency, we should plan for several meetings. One meeting like this time of year in particular, especially with so many of our population are seniors.
Yeah.
And I just think we should take that into consideration and put it out there to the public so they know they can either go this time, that time, or maybe that time, right? It's
Yeah.
just for transparency.
Yeah, it's a great, so Donna, would that be a decision of the board to make tonight? Could the board make that decision this evening?
No, they don't necessarily have to make that decision this evening. So what will happen is that after council makes a decision on whether we proceed to the one that we're requesting tonight, after that, we will reassess to see if there's need for an additional or 2 or 3 additional public meetings. But there are also other avenues that members of the public can provide their representations on the plan. The plan has been online in its draft format for over 2 years, and the most recent copies also there now. So if they have any comments or if they want to see any changes made, they can also send in those requests to the planning department. So there are different avenues that we allowed the members of the public to actually provide representation on the draft document.
Thank you. One thing I will note, that there has been little to no social media coming from the city or any PSAs about this. So I think as a city, I think that there needs to be more of that happening over the next few weeks,
And that
or
will
we
happen.
will be back here
Yeah.
next month
That will
looking for more
happen.
meetings, because we haven't been, we just haven't been doing, there hasn't been anything out there. Go ahead, Councillor Beck.
Yeah, just on that note, we had chatted earlier about updating some of the information, it's great to see there, so having this charlottetownhall.ca page, there is a link there, the feedback form, is that the one where they would provide input on the, okay, so it's kind of it's kind of hitting what we were looking for, that we can get that concise, people don't have to go very far to find it. The information is there, it kind of has the various versions, it's the red line version, what we heard, phase 2, Charlottetown draft official plan from May 2024, what we heard in the final report, the new official plan presentation, so everything's kind of right there. And it's just, to your point, Deputy, is that getting it out there, that this is where it is, everything's right there, and please access it. The other thing, kind of was talking to Rosemary's part about the public presentation. Is there any registration requirement for that, or does everyone just show up? Or is there an opportunity to register? Say if I do want to, say we have 3 meetings and I would like to speak at Wednesday's meeting. Can I register for that, or is there an opportunity to do that?
So we will play that one by ear in terms of if we'll take a list in terms of registration. I know we've done that before where we've had instances where a number of persons wanted to speak at certain meetings. So if this is the case in this instance, then we will consider that. But members of the public are free to show up at any one of these meetings as soon as they're placed and they know the date and the time and the location that these will be held. There's no need for registration in the process. But if there is, based on the numbers, then we will reconsider at that point as to how we approach that process or that request. But also to add that we will be meeting with the communications team, the city's communications team on Thursday, right? Yes, and we will discuss how we put all of this out to the public, as you had just suggested. It's something that we wanted to do before now, but now that we've had the opportunity to have this meeting, then we can now go ahead and put something out, because we now anticipate that this public meeting will be taking place shortly.
Great, thank you for that. I know I've driven through some other communities that are engaged in a similar process, and they have roadside signs up, almost like it's a political campaign, like, so they've really ramped up the ability for the public to be well-informed and engaged that this is coming, so. Rosemary, go ahead, Sid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just wanna kind of reiterate what you just said. It's not an individual application that we are, rezoning application that we're going to the public for a consultation. This is really a common vision for the whole city. And this requires as many, consultation that as much we can practically. I would suggest, again, this is just a suggestion, using not just social media, but also traditional media to encourage more people to come and attend the consultation. Because the more we have, the more, the better outcome we're gonna have, because at the end of the day, the whole point of having consultation is to get as many public feedback as we can. Yes, I understand, having something online and having a format and then people writing, it's really ideal. But given the fact that, people really tend to come out and engage rather than actually make a written submission, which we have seen. But if we were to engage larger audience, larger residents, I think, having that sort of, as the chair was mentioning, some sort of a campaign telling them people to encourage to come and actually participate in this process would make a huge difference. And I'm guessing that might give us a good outcome at the end of the day.
Great, thank you.
No, just to say that it is the stated process that will be used, and that's the traditional media that you mentioned. So it will be posted in the newspaper, so it's not just social media. I just mentioned that because that's something that the council brought up, and just wanted to let him know that that would be addressed as well.
Great. Paul?
Yeah, Madam Chair, thanks. I have a couple of questions, but they're more operational.
Okay,
And I think when it gets to the public meeting, I think you're going to find that a lot of the questions will be operational. I mean, the plan is an overall umbrella plan under which decisions will get made. But I guess just a heads up, who is going to facilitate that meeting, and whoever is going to facilitate that meeting, I think they'll have to be sensitive to the fact where they're gonna have to cut people off, because I think there will be, just by nature, I think there will be a number of,
well, I think that right from the beginning of that meeting, there will be the opening statements where we will explain what the public meeting is for, because the zoning and development bylaw changes public meeting will be forthcoming. And so that's where you'll be getting into the meat and potatoes of how various aspects of the new official plan, if it's approved, will take effect. And that will be through the zoning and development bylaw. So I think at the beginning of that meeting,
set that,
in really plain language that we all need to have at any meeting to explain what we're doing today. And that should even be in the media blitz that's going to happen after Thursday. It should be crystal clear of what you're there to ask questions on. And I think it will be really important that it's not that we don't want the public to get into those operational questions, but that's not the platform to which that should happen, because that's coming. And the public's gonna have all kinds of opportunity to ask those questions in the spring.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, but that's a good point, Paul, thank you. Yeah. Rosemary,
I
go
want to
ahead.
clarify, Madam Chair, so the zoning and bylaw, the new ones are coming in the springtime?
Yep, we've already, council has already approved the consultants who are beginning to work on that as early as this week.
Okay.
And so, that will be, coming to, working its way through the process. Ideally, we'd love to have this completed by summer. And, you know, council has had to approve and ask for permission with our half funding for an extension, because a lot of this work was expected to be done sooner than this. So we're anticipating that we'll get that approval for the extension. Well, we really don't have much choice. And so we'll be seeing those, the changes from staff based on this official plan that will align with the new zoning and development bylaw, spring, summer. Yep. Yep. Any other questions for today? Seeing none, so the staff recommendation is for the planning board to recommend to council that we proceed to public consultation. So does somebody want to, okay, moved by Councilor McCabe and seconded by Jackie, to move this on to council to recommend for public consultation. So the resolution is on the floor. Any questions on the resolution before we vote? Seeing none, all those in favor? Okay, that was unanimous, so this will move on to our monthly meeting of council next week for the recommendation from planning board to move on to public consultation. Okay, any new business? Motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilor Beck or Councilor McCabe, seconded by Jackie, all those in favor?
There,
Wonderful.
we did all our public meetings in one summer, well, because it was like.
The new planner, one of the new planners, I think.